The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts Alison Furno and Debi Vandenboom.
Today's topic, how the federal government is putting women at risk. We have a special guest, Christy Narsi. She is the National Chapter Director of Independent Women's Network. Christy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, we are so excited to jump into this. People have heard all over the news about Title IX. What is Title IX and where is it coming from? It's recently just been sparked up with things happening across the nation, particularly with us seeing boys and girls sports, things like that. And we've seen everything from injuries to lawsuits to fights breaking out. And we want to kind of back up a little bit because you are an expert in this and you've been fighting this fight, which is amazing. So talk to us a little bit about what is Title IX and the redefinition of sex that has been happening across America.
Yeah, so Title IX was originally intended to protect opportunities for girls, right? And so that was in education. They were going to be able to have the same opportunities that boys had. What is it, 52 years now, maybe 53, that was put in place. And so this rewrite of Title IX, which to be very clear is it is unconstitutional, it is illegal to do it the way that they've done this, right? And so in the rewrite, they've added so many different things that never should even be in there. One of those being they're trying to redefine what sex is to become gender. Sex is now gender, right? And so we know that that's not true. There's male, female. Right. And so, so that's what this whole conversation is about. It's the rewrite of what was originally used to protect girls is now discriminating against them.
Yeah. Right. And I've seen that a lot in all these doctors who are not political. They don't get into these conversations, but they've come out and been saying there is a difference between gender and sex and everything from hormones to like scientifically. We already know that. We would think that would be logical to say, right? But it's worth saying at this point. So what you're saying is crazy that that's happening. Where do you think it's coming from? Like, what is the core of this issue?
That's a good question. And I've thought about that a lot because you have a couple of different things. You've got the gender ideology movement, right? You've got people that have said gender dysphoria, which is a valid mental illness, which is what it is and how it should be treated.
Right.
But you've got this whole movement. You know, I'm 46 years old. I don't know how old you guys are, but in my day, it was the anorexia bulimia bandwagon that everyone was jumping on, right? And so that's actually what you're seeing today. You're seeing a social contagion that has been used to literally just manipulate in so many areas. And so I think just like anything else, you know, we sound like conspiracy theorists, but there's dark money behind all of it. There always is. There's pharma. I mean, you go down the list, it's all there.
It's a lot of money at stake, both politically and in the pharmaceutical industry. And they have been, for a long time, even before this Title IX, changing the definition of sex in government documents, in legal things across states and at the federal level, of redefining what sex means leading up to this. So that it's like these stair-step increments that they do. And then people get, why are you freaking out about this one little minor change? Well, they add up to where we are today and what the kinds of things that we're seeing that we're going to dive into today. But yeah.
So what actually changed? We talked about like they're trying to redefine the sex and gender and all that stuff. So what is it now and when did it take effect already or is it going to take effect soon?
So August 1st, it took effect. And it's a couple of things. So you've got the redefinition of sex to include gender. You've got the lack of being able to have due process on college campuses. So what does that look like? That looks like your young men, if they're accused of sexual assault, they don't get due process. So it isn't just affecting women, right? It's affecting men too. And we all know one accusation like that can ruin a man's life. right? Even if they're innocent, right? So that's the scary part. And then as it affects schools, so I'm president of a K-8 charter school in North Phoenix, and side note, we will completely defy all of this. We will not be conforming to this. Yeah, I mean, we're not doing it. It's crazy. It's crazy. But part of that is they want to hold educators accountable to using pronouns. And if we don't use pronouns, if we don't enforce the use of pronouns, we can be, quote, disciplined. That's all it says. Don't know what that means. Probably isn't good. So it comes down to federally funded schools or schools that are receiving federal funds being forced to do that and keep it from the parents. It's explicit in their writing that they have to keep this from the parents if that's what the child wants to do. So it's lie to your kids. It's no more freedom of speech because we're going to compelled speech now, right?
Right.
Your freedom of religion, that's gone. Yeah, I mean, so it doesn't just affect one thing, right?
Right.
It's this domino effect of freedom lost.
So, okay, so I want to kind of break this down a little bit. So federal means this is happening across all of the states. And correct me if I'm wrong, one of you, but most public schools are federally funded, right? Yeah. Is it the majority of public schools? So we're talking about...
They have to comply with federal law.
They have to comply with federal, okay.
So it's more about... The funding is tied to following federal law. You can't be publicly funded if you're breaking federal law. So this is considered federal law, and so then they're forcing organizations, and this is why they've been putting it in other things as well. This redefinition of sex, so that they can force housing, even if it's outside of school, like just housing policies and things that apply across all the states to be able to force them to follow this federal law.
So it's basically the federal government saying, if you don't follow these things that we want you to follow, we're pulling your funding. So when people ask, why doesn't the school just not do what they're asking, right? And it's like, okay, but there's probably millions of dollars tied to them following these rules, which then puts severe pressure on them. If they want to stay open, if they want to continue operating the way they're operating, they have to comply with what is being told.
Yeah.
So
and we're going to talk about one of those a
very
little later in the episode. We have a couple of specifics that we'll go into with that as well.
Yeah, because think about what you just said, right? They have, this is government overreach, right? It was implemented illegally. They don't have the executive power to do this.
Right.
So then they use fear and threats to enforce it, right? I mean, I don't know. That's a big deal, right? It's not really a small thing. Now, has any school ever lost their federal funding for not complying? I don't know.
I don't think so, but
I don't think so. I might be the guinea pig. I don't know. The good news, you know what? But I'm happy to be. It's like I've told people this is the hill I die on.
Right.
I have daughters. They're 23, 24 years old now, so it's my turn to fight. I'm going to have grandbabies at some point. We got to hold the line, right? And I know I'm talking to people that intend to do this too. But yeah, it's going to be a fight, and it'll be interesting in Arizona specifically because we already have the Dysart School District and the Peoria School District, very large school districts, both with presidents who are female, and they've both led their boards into unanimous votes to not change anything.
That's awesome.
That's great.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
So it's a good precedent that we've already had set here for us.
And Christian colleges as well in the state are doing the same thing. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about specifically getting into some situations of how this is impacting people already. And we've seen it so many times. How is this impacting women's sports?
Well, I mean, the timing of this is amazing, right? Because we have the Olympics. We literally watched men beat on women for sport and then receive a gold medal for it.
Right.
It's insane to me that it's allowed and that everybody's just watching.
Cheering it on.
Anything.
Cheering it on. A female being beaten. How does that not set a very dangerous precedent? And then I think about too, I mean, he cheated. Let's talk about it, right? I mean, they had tests that proved that he has male chromosomes. That was a male. Both of them, they were males, right?
Right.
And so too much testosterone used to be considered cheating, right?
Right.
So I don't know, do we give Lance Armstrong his medals back? Like, I don't, like,
Right.
what is this? It's a can of worms at this point, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, how do you, I think about, I played sports. We know so many people that play sports. I cannot imagine how much that would kill my confidence. Yes. Having the ability to be a champion in a woman's sport, and then a man comes in and takes my medal. And how does that make me feel as a woman? Like I'm trying to be the best and I'm never able to, because I am just like we all are. It's like, I completely believe in biology. Like, men are stronger than women. There is no like, oh, maybe, yeah, like the weakest man is probably still stronger than me because of hormones and biology and all of that stuff, right?
160%. That is how much stronger a man's punch is than a woman's. 160%.
And the crazy thing is, so I was talking to Christy about this. It's like, okay, so back, I think it was like 2013, Fallon Fox was an MMA fighter that was a man who claimed to be a woman and fractured a woman's eye socket. And so yet here we are 11 years later, and this is still being allowed to happen, right? Yeah. It was a big deal at the time, but it kind of flew, in the sports world, but it kind of flew under the radar. I remember speaking about it and writing about it and sharing information about it at the time because I just was appalled that this was happening. But this is here 11 years later, and it's worse. It's not better.
And it's not consistent, because sports, if you're thinking of competition, sports has to be objective. There are points to win. There are ways to gain. There are angles that you use. There's strategy. So if sports is objective, then how do we have a subjective reasoning for who gets to do what? If it's a woman's sport, it should only be a woman. Should not be that complicated.
Well, and you have other divisions of like weight in fighting and age in sports. Like when you have baseball, you don't have 5-year-olds competing against 17-year-olds, right? So there are legitimate like physical restrictions of who we allow to compete with whom.
Right.
And so this is just like we said, it's a no-brainer. So this is kind of the low-hanging fruit, because we know that this is an issue. This has been the most prevalent issue that's been, in the forefront of the news. More people are talking about sports than anything else, because just we've had so many things with Riley Gaines and with Leah Thomas, and with this going on at the Olympics and all of these things that have happened. Those runners in Connecticut, like this has been kind of on the forefront of.
Well, yeah, and it's like, at what point are these organizations going to say, oh, okay, maybe it's a bad idea. We've had 20 concussions, 50, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you wait until enough people are injured so badly that they can,
Right.
How
many more women?
Right.
How many more women have to get hurt? You met Peyton. Peyton is one of our ambassadors, and she was a senior in high school. And she took a volleyball spike. You're a volleyball girl, you get this.
Yep.
To the face from a boy that was playing on the girls' team. And she still has cognitive issues from it. She still has issues with her vision. It affected her school. It affected her learning in college. This is so dangerous. So dangerous. And so, yeah, you're right. How many more do we have to see before we say, well, gosh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this? This isn't smart.
Right.
Right. And you lose the protection to be able to, again, when I'm thinking from a coach perspective, have that ability to have a space to build your confidence in your ability to execute something, and you never want to lose that ability. How, what other places do you have that kind of pressure and that kind of push? And that's why sports and activities and all these different things are good for kids, because it helps teach them those life lessons. So
And leadership.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that leadership, the ability to do well in job interviews. You go down the list of things that sports does for girls, we're going to start losing out on some really great opportunities. It's not just the titles, right? It's lifelong learning. Yeah.
And college scholarships. And
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to keep going here, because there's so many places that this Title IX is impacting. So let's now talk about the prisons across America. So tell me what you've seen in that realm. What is happening with the prison system when it comes to Title IX, if men are allowed in women's cells? Like, how is that working?
It's the hardest part for me. For some reason, this just, it gets to me the most. We have an ambassador named Amy Ichikawa, and she was incarcerated for 12 years in a women's prison in California. And when she got out, she made it her mission to really help women transition, right? being incarcerated and transition into society well, right? And she started getting hundreds of letters from women. And they are literally saying, I have a convicted predator locked in my room with me. So over 700 men in just the California prison system have said, I'm a female, and have been transferred into these women's cells. And one of them, we've got documentaries that we've done because we want to get their stories out. They matter.
Right.
They matter. You know how many women incarcerated, it's well over 90%, were previously sexually assaulted. Some of them, the first time they felt safe in their life was when they went to prison. And we're putting predators in there with them. You can't even go to the bathroom on your own.
Right.
In a cell, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then one of the gals told us a story where they've got 8 bunks in one cell. So it's a larger one, right? Mm-hmm. And so this man gets the privilege to be number 8, I guess. I don't know. And he's having a hard time, and he's saying, the women don't want me here. And the women don't, because it's not comfortable.
Right.
And so what happens? Well, he gets moved into a private cell.
Oh.
What are private cells for? Good behavior. I mean, so the things that women should have had the right to have are now giving privilege to predators, convicted sexual predators. I just, yeah.
And you don't have to have had surgery, right? I mean,
right.
So this goes back probably not directly to Title IX, but to the redefinition of sex in general, right? How they're redefining what sex is. So if someone claims to be female, they can be fully intact male, right? Not having had surgery.
You don't even have to have any.
No.
You can just say it?
Because if your sex is what you think you are, like if sex and gender are now convoluted and twisted,
right?
Because there are actual instances where they have impregnated women in the
yeah, they hand out condoms now in the women's prison.
Because there are men.
Oh my God.
I mean, we're laughing, but it's really, it's appalling.
You'd cry if you didn't laugh.
It's appalling. And so in some cases they have had surgery, and in some of those cases it's on our dime, right? It's on the taxpayers' funding, where you have women who can't get a hold of feminine products, right? They can't get a hold of like monthly feminine products, but they can get gender reassignment surgery paid for by the taxpayers. The men can, right? Or women too.
Is that
you don't have women clamoring to get into men's prison, but
I
you have
wonder
men,
why.
I wonder
men
why.
clamoring to get into women's prison. So and so it's this whole crazy thing that's going on within the prison system.
Well, and from the men's perspective, it's probably safer for them, and you know what I mean?
Right.
They're
if you're
like,
a predator, if you're a child, molester, right, it's very dangerous to be in men's prison because they don't take that, right? So you're more likely to get assaulted and beat up and all that kind of thing. So if you claim, I mean, I'm not saying that this is the reasoning, but but I'm saying that, okay, so it is it's better for them in their mind, right, that they can be in a women's prison,
right,
and do whatever they want, right?
Yeah, they deserve protection too, is kind of the, in my mind, excuse. But at the end of the day, you committed a felony. You don't deserve everything at this point. You don't deserve everyone else's rights to be taken away.
To put other people at risk,
exactly.
right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. It's like, okay, we're not the justice system. We've got to, prisoners and everybody should be treated humanely, right? No matter what they've done. Yep. They should be treated humanely. That's part of, in our Bill of Rights, right? That about cruel and unusual punishment and those kind of things. However, the prison system is putting women at risk by housing men in with women in the same cell, like what Christy was talking about. If you're a woman and you're in a cell, like you have nothing that you can do to protect yourself because you're trapped in that room, 24 hours a day with somebody that could be potentially a rapist or a murderer or something that, and again, we've already talked about how men are so much stronger than women. I mean, it's a dangerous an unfair thing.
And it's not just a hey, this could happen. It's happened.
It is.
These women have been assaulted by the assaulter in their cell.
Right.
He exposes himself. It's all manner of. Yeah.
It just takes a quick Google search, and you can find all kinds of stories about women being assaulted in prison by men that are claiming.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah. That is insane. So, that's a rough one. So, let's go down another level and say, okay, so we know this is happening in very many areas with adults. So now let's go to college campuses. So level younger, I didn't know what was going on in college. Thank God I'm here. But so how has this impacted sororities? So now we're talking about college kids, right, who are still figuring out who they are, who still have, all of these questions and whatever. But how has this impacted sororities and college campuses?
And dorms as well.
Yeah.
It's also affected dorms in college, yeah.
Yeah. It's the sororities are a great example. So our Independent Women's Law Center, the director of our law center, she is lead counsel for the Kappa Kappa Gamma lawsuit. So these are the Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority girls, right? They pay the money, they enroll, they expect to be in a house with girls. And lo and behold, there is a boy. And he's happy to expose himself. He's happy to demand his rights. The girls have now become the oppressor. Somehow, women are now the oppressor, if you can even imagine a world like that. And so these girls are oppressing him. Well, I have no sympathy for that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, he's a lot bigger, and he's not just a small guy, he's a big guy, right? And so yeah, it's affecting that. And so we're doing everything we can to defend these girls because they should never have been put in that position. And these sororities many of them are just saying, hey, let's rewrite our bylaws without a vote. Let's not tell anyone, let's just leave it in their hands to decide what a boy is. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
That's insane. Do you know what school is that at?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's...
I have the girls, I have the last names of the girls in my head, but I can't, the school, Roanoke?
Maybe?
Am I saying it right? I think it's Roanoke.
And I'm wondering, because there's probably a lot of like the big, like Pac-10 type schools that are starting to allow this stuff. There's no way they're not.
Yeah. They probably have been a lot longer than we realize.
But it's crazy that, there's for so long, women were fighting for their rights to do all of these things. And so we have it. Okay, great. We don't have to ask for an even playing field. We have it. And now it's like now boys want to go into our space.
Yeah.
Like we fought for that space in a totally different way, but we fought for that space already. And I don't think people understand it that way, that you lose your protection and your ability to just be who you know what I mean? It's just
to be safe on campus.
Yeah.
Because it also affects dorms and where they can place dorms. So if like you're sending your daughter to college, and this could also potentially happen to boys, right? If they're sending a boy to college and there's a trans,
Absolutely.
like someone who's a girl who says that she's a boy, that is housed where they think they should be. And so it's putting these weird situations where it can make them uncomfortable and in some cases unsafe. And to go a step further with that too, not only is it affecting college campuses, but it's also affecting ministries and nonprofits that house men and women. So you have places like the Phoenix Dream Center that is sex trafficking rescue. You have domestic violence shelters. You have homeless shelters.
Right.
And a lot of them get federal grant money. So there have been some very specific cases, and again, this is something that you can look up because we don't have time to go through all of these, but if you look up stories about this, there have been cases where grant money and because they get some federal funding because these help the community, right? So these are community services that are run by nonprofit, usually religious organizations. And you've had cases where because they will not place men in rooms with vulnerable women, so you have like a domestic violence shelter or you have a homeless shelter or a sex trafficking rescue program, it is important to maintain that safe space for these women that are vulnerable. They're extra vulnerable, right? Yes. So they're extremely vulnerable. They likely have been sexually assaulted or had some kind of trauma like that. They need that space that's safe, that's just women. And if you don't comply with that redefinition of sex and allow a man who comes to, there have been cases all over the country where this has happened, that they get shut down by the state if they're in a liberal state, or they lose money, they lose grant money and they lose funding if they will not house men in with a man who says he's a woman. And again, does not have to have surgery, can be fully intact and be housed in a domestic violence shelter or a sex trafficking rescue program. That is insane.
It is
That is insane.
Yeah, it's abuse. That's why, to me, when I say it goes beyond the sports, it goes beyond any of this, which are very important. There's no question about it. But this is the sexual exploitation of women, and that's all this is. At the end of the day, you think about Riley, also one of our ambassadors. She's in a locker room, 40 girls on a swim team. They're fairly large swim teams, forced to undress in front of the 6'4" male with his full genitalia intact, right? And these girls are, I'm sorry, they're paraded in front of him for his pleasure. This is not you get it. That's what's happening, right? Like, and we were just talking about this before we started the show. Right? It's like, I can't even imagine, like, something probably not healthy happens in me when I see my baby girls get, threatened. Right. It's probably a little bit of an over-emote, right? But that's what mamas do. Where was any adult?
Men, like, why are men allowed, men and women, adults, why are adults allowing this to go on?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just been such a long time that this has been happening. And again, I think this is somewhere where the church needs to be speaking up on these things and speaking out, because where are the people speaking up on these things and demanding, no, this is not okay. Right. This is not okay to put women at risk. Especially when you're talking about children, when you're talking about college girls, when you're talking about vulnerable women in domestic violence shelters or sex trafficking rescue programs or whatever, or stuck in a women's prison even. If they are completely vulnerable, someone needs to advocate for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
They cannot advocate for themselves, right?
Yeah.
They're not in a place to be able to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. And that's another way that they're exploited, right? It's because if you have
had
an assault, right. So if you're a woman who's experienced sexual assault, seeing a man is triggering.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Paula Scanlon, she's another example. She was on Leah Thomas's swim team. Leah, his name escapes me at the moment, but he went by Leah. But she has gone in front of Congress and she has said, I was sexually assaulted. And when I saw this man, she changed in the janitor's closet the entire season. What? It's the trauma trigger, right? So my point is, women are not going to have the opportunity to heal and get the mental health they deserve if there's men in their private spaces constantly triggering their trauma. And that's a real thing. It's not like we're exaggerating at any point. This is mental health that we're talking about. These women won't heal.
And it's crazy that, I used to work at a domestic violence shelter, and while you were talking about that and going through that stuff, I remember that I was a case manager, and I remember seeing women come in with like a totally black face, and they're like, yeah, I just, like they have tears running out of their eyes, and they're like, are you sure that whoever assaulted me isn't gonna find me, right? And they would just like stand there and look at me, and I was like, oh my God. And that is when they had that protection, right? Like we know, okay, there's only women allowed in this shelter. So, and it really was one of those things until they can get back on their feet and, because that is trauma. It's insane trauma. So until they have the time to get back mentally where they need to be, just seeing a man literally can be triggering. And that's why they make all women's and all, they want people to
feel safe.
Yeah, to feel safe. And so it is directly what you guys are talking about. So we only have a few minutes left, but I want to get to this one too, because this is happening more at the state level where people can see it. I mean, just college campuses are higher up, but like high schools, middle schools are right here. Your kids are going, right? Type of thing. And so how are we seeing this impact the school system at middle school, high school level?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for the K-8 school that I work with, and, my daughters are grown up now, but, at the end of the day, these kids are not getting the support that they need. Right. So if they really do say, hey, I think this is happening to me, I think I've got gender dysphoria, there's not an effort to say, you know what, we need to bring body and soul together. That's what should be the focus, bringing this into, instead, what's happening in these schools is that they're being given education that says, hey, you know what? Sex is whatever, it's arbitrary, just tell us what you are, and then we will help transition you.
Which is insane. And I know that there's a push in Arizona and multiple school districts to have the gender neutral bathrooms where it's all open to everybody. Yeah. And it's, again, there's so many, not only like mental and health implications to that, just to be able to have a private space, but you don't feel protected if you're in that. I mean, I just literally can't.
Well, and what's crazy as far as that goes too is one of the things that they have always historically used to determine third world countries and their education standard, like if they have education, is if girls have private bathroom spaces, because that's one of the detractors. Yes, you can look it up, but that's one of the detractors, that girls don't go to school. They won't come to in third world countries, so Africa, in tribal areas or whatever. The reason why girls are not being educated is because there is nowhere private for them to go and be in the bathroom alone, for both health and physical safety risks. So that is one of the things. This is what's so crazy, is organizations go around and they try to advocate for that at these schools in different countries to empower girls to be able to go to school and have an education. And here we are going the opposite direction. In America and in the Western world, right? In Europe and in other places, we're going in reverse. And so it really is, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So we've covered a huge spectrum of things here, which is amazing, but I also want to reflect on what we can do to fight, how we can help, and the positive sides of this. And the positive side of this is all of a sudden we see tons of people standing up saying, hold on a second. We're going to figure this out. We're going to navigate.
Because this is not okay,
Right, because this is not okay. So let's talk about some schools and districts. You brought up earlier a few districts in Arizona that are not okay with this and that are saying we're not going to comply to this. What can people do that are listening, right? And they're like, hey, I want to help this issue. I want to stand up for girls. I want to make sure that, my district isn't doing this. One thing that comes to mind for me is people who do stand up and stand up for girls, you need to thank them because they're getting a lot of pressure already. Yeah, I can guarantee that they're getting a lot of pressure. So anybody that you see, whether it's a school board member or somebody who's on education committees or runs schools, anybody like that who is in that position, email them, call them, send them a text and say, thank you for standing up for our girls. But any other practical advice that we can add to that?
Absolutely. Man, we have to be testifying at our school boards and at our city councils. That is really what affects our lives the most. And one of the things that I talk to the chapter leaders that I have in our organization is I say, listen, you need to go and be the mature, level-headed voice in the room with facts, because you would be amazed if you haven't gone down to testify before. It is all manner of people screaming at the boards, and it's just, there's no decorum. And so we have to be the mature ones in the room. We have to have facts, and we have to keep doing it. We have to just keep talking about it. That's the only way we're going to do it, is just keep talking about it, and talk about it in the workplace. I tell people everywhere. It's not, don't consider it taboo, because that's how we're losing the fight, is considering it
Right.
And I would add two things to that. I would say that this election is going to be crucial. 2024, make sure that you are researching candidates to know where they stand on this. Are they ones pushing all of this crazy ideology, right? Are they advocating for that those things that make women and girls less safe, or are they standing up against it? And also, in connection to some of these organizations, if you know people that are in prison ministry with women, start asking questions and find out, are prisons in Arizona? I don't know the answer to that, right? Are prisons in Arizona allowing this to happen? Because we can make a fuss at the state capitol if that's the case, but we need information on that. So if you know people that are in prison ministry, start talking to us. Contact Alison or I, and or Christy as well at her organization, and let us know that that's going on. And also with some of these organizations that we listed, like domestic violence shelters and sex trafficking programs and those kind of things, they are losing federal money and grant money because they won't stand up. Because they won't comply with this nonsense, right? And they won't put their women at risk that are in their program. So they need support. They need financial support. They need extra support from the church and from the community to keep them open, so that they can continue to do what they're doing well.
Yep. And at iwnetwork.com, we've got action centers where you can literally, right now, you can send a letter to Planned Parenthood, because they're just letting girls walk out with free testosterone. Yes. It's a controlled substance. In 30 minutes, they can go in and go out, and they can start their transition.
They are one of the largest providers now of wrong sex hormones for minors. Yeah.
Yep. Wow. So we'll help you send those letters. We'll help you contact the right people and tell them, hey, you got to knock it off. So. Band together.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think that's super practical advice. So we're going to these local meetings. We know that, like you said, super important being level-headed. We have to go in with facts and with logic and say, here's what I'm seeing, here's what's happening, gathering the information, and knowing what's happening in our state, and then talking to those elected officials, the people that are running the organizations, and like we said, thanking them when they're doing what they're supposed to do, because it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of work. But thank you, Christy, so much for being on the show today. This is amazing information. So thankful for you and everything that you're doing for this fight. And thank you for listening to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify and follow us on social media. Find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.